Welcome to the Burlington Chamber of Commerce Federal Candidates Meeting. My name is Jennifer Smith and I am the Chair of the Board of Directors with the Burlington Chamber of Commerce. Today we have brought together the federal candidates in the Burlington riding to answer your questions about the issues that matter most to you and your business. Before we get started, I would like to thank our exclusive sponsor of today's event, the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington. And in a few moments, President Donna Bacher from the Realtors Association will introduce our candidates. Thank you. Free access to all members and non-members have been made possible thanks to you. We can't do events like this without the support of our sponsors. I would also like to acknowledge the Burlington Chamber's respect for the rich and vibrant culture of our Indigenous people. We wish to honor the original people of Turtle Island as we recognize the homelands as a sacred and spiritual place known since time immemorial. In the spirit of partnership and reconciliation, we acknowledge that our membership resides in a variety of territories and homelands. Let me start by reviewing the format of today's event. Today's meeting is not a debate. It is a question and answer session. And because this is a Chamber of Commerce event, questions today will be focusing on business issues. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds for opening remarks. The speaker's order is alphabetical based on last name. Questions developed by the Chamber's Political Action Committee will first be posed to all candidates. Immediately following questions developed by the Political Action Committee, the moderator will ask the questions that were received by members at the time of registration. Note that all questions will be read by today's moderator, who will be introduced shortly. Some questions have been edited for length. Answers to all questions will be limited to 60 seconds. A yellow card will indicate 10 seconds remaining. A red card indicates time is up. The Q&A portion of the meeting ends at 10:20 a.m. or when there are no more questions, whichever occurs first. At the end of the Q&A session, each candidate will be given 90 seconds for closing remarks. Order will be the reverse of that to the opening remarks. Today's candidates have been asked not to display any promotional material, but may wear a campaign button is desired. Candidates may also not use any props in their responses. All candidates were provided with these rules ahead of time, but not the questions. Our timekeeper today will be Bill Butler, Chair of the Chamber's Political Action Committee. I will now turn the meeting over to our sponsor, Donna Bacher, President of the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington, and also a broker with Pure Realty, who will introduce our candidates and today's moderator.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Bacher. I'm the 2021 president of the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington, a not-for-profit organization that proudly represents more than 3,600 realtors in Hamilton, Burlington, Haldimand, and North Niagara. We're thrilled to be the presenting sponsor of the Chamber's 2021 Federal All Candidates Meeting for the riding of Burlington. This year, the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington is excited to be celebrating an important milestone, our 100th year anniversary. RAHB is proud of our rich and long history of supporting the communities in which our members and clients live and work. And in alignment with this tradition, we are especially proud to be a member of the Burlington Chamber of Commerce. We value our membership and we're pleased to be part of this open forum for addressing issues that affect one of our main communities. As Canadians, we are going back to the polls on September 20th, only 23 months since our last election. As realtors, we've always been concerned with safe and affordable housing. And with the global pandemic, the situation has only worsened. Canada's housing supply does not reflect the nation's increase in population growth, In fact, Canada has the lowest number of housing units per 1,000 residents of any G7 country. A large part of RAHB's market area includes the city of Burlington. Many members of the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington, along with their clients, are proud to call Burlington home. So with this in mind, I hope the candidates here today will elaborate on their respective parties' plans to tackle housing supply and affordability, along with other critical issues such as the pandemic. These matters that are not just at the top of mind for Burlingtonians, but are also foremost for all Canadians. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us this morning, and I would now like to introduce the candidates for the riding of Burlington. Emily Brown, Conservative candidate. Christian Cullis, Green Party candidate. The Honorable Karina Gould, Liberal candidate. Nick Page, NDP candidate. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Michelle Eaton. Michelle is Vice President of Public Affairs from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. A communications and public affairs professional for more than 15 years, Michelle joined the Ontario Chamber of Commerce in 2018. Prior to that, she held a variety of leaderships in both the public and private sectors. Michelle has an honors BA in political science and French from Western University, as well as an executive master of business administration from the Ivy Business School. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you for the Burlington Chamber of Commerce for organizing today's conversation. Good morning, everyone that's joined us. We've all heard the rules and the format, so it's time to begin. Candidates, you will have 90 seconds for your opening remarks. We will hold up again a yellow card when you have 10 seconds remaining, and then a red card when time is up. So let's kick off with opening remarks from Burlington's Conservative Representative, Emily Brown.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So I am a full-time professor at Sheridan College. I teach in the business faculty. I teach business financial math and business calculus and algebra, as well as contemporary issues in business. I am a liaison for entrepreneurs in business to work on capstone projects with my business students, giving them hands-on experience so they're prepared for the workforce. Before coming to Sheridan, I worked on a bi-ministerial project where I explored and worked on implementing a post-admission numeracy assessment to really address the numeracy gap in Ontarians, which often leads to underemployment and poor professional and personal outcomes. I've taught in the grades 4 to 7 as a science and math specialist with my background in math education and also in chemical engineering technology. Prior to moving into education, I worked in the oil and gas sector in research, both in Canada and internationally, where I researched greener, more energy efficient ways to process the world's crude, as well as looking at additives for fuel to help our gas burning engines burn cleaner and more efficiently. I have a long history in volunteer work, including being on the board or as a volunteer with the Living Arts Center in Mississauga, with Junior Achievement, with the Junior Forest Wardens, with St. John Ambulance. I live in Burlington with my husband.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks. That's time. Appreciate that. Your opening remarks. We'll now hear from Burlington's Green Party Representative, Christian Cullis.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for holding this, for the Realtors Association for sponsoring this. I am Christian Cullis, Green Party candidate for Burlington. I'm an independent landscaper, owning my own small business, and I'd like to take a moment to appreciate this wonderful morning that we're having this meeting on, because business is ultimately, I see, a tool to serve the necessities of life. It's not that we are obsessed with the next big promotion because we want a bigger number in our bank account. It's because we think of the things that that money can buy us. It can buy us peace of mind, can buy us a trip to the beach, can buy us anything except that which matters the most: friends, family, people, and life. I'm happy to be speaking with all of you and to present the frankly stunning Green Party position on business. There is an ecosystem of commerce, and ensuring that it is fair and competitive to everyone is a priority in creating a new and better post-COVID world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. I appreciate your opening remarks. We'll now hear from Burlington's Liberal representative, the Honorable Karina Gould.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. This election, we have a choice between the Liberals that will keep moving this country forward on ending the COVID-19 pandemic, taking bold climate action, building a resilient and sustainable economy that works for everyone, or going backwards with the Conservatives. I've had the incredible privilege and honor to be your member of Parliament the last 6 years, and today I am humbly applying for the job again. I adore our community and the people that form it. I have worked hard to deliver for Burlington. I am tenacious and I am determined to continue to stand up for you, your family, and our community. I have delivered important investments to fight climate change, restore our natural habitat, invest in our incredible local businesses and community organizations like the Legion, Food for Life, the Halton Women's Place, and many others. While the last 18 months have been incredibly challenging, I have seen the kindness and resilience of this community. I have worked closely with the Chamber to provide supports to businesses, and I have worked with thousands of people in Burlington to ensure they had the supports they needed to get through the pandemic. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and sponsors for organizing today's event, and to those watching. It is my delight to be here with you all this morning, and I very much look forward to this important conversation on the future of our country.
Thank you so much, Minister. We'll now hear from Burlington's NDP representative, Nick Page.
Hello, my name is Nick Page and I'm running for the NDP. I'm an autistic man who earned a Bachelor of Mathematics from the University of Waterloo. I majored in computer science with a combinatorics and optimization minor. I'm fascinated by data and human behavior, and I think it's important for government to not say and do things just because they sound good. We need to make sure we consider all the consequences of our actions and think about what behavior we're incentivizing with the legislation we pass. I think we as a society have an obligation to help those less fortunate. I think we as a community have an obligation to foster and support small business. And I think it is truly important that everyone pays their fair share. Large corporations that have increased their profits during this pandemic haven't had to do so under recent governments. It's time that that changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. And thank you all candidates for your opening remarks. We'll now move to the Q&A session. A reminder that these responses are limited to 60 seconds each. And again, keep watching for the yellow card, which indicates there's 10 seconds remaining, and red card when the time is up. The Burlington Chamber of Commerce represents the interests of Burlington's business community, and many of the questions created today are in response to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's election platform, what it takes to grow, priorities for Canada's next Parliament prosperity platform. This has been endorsed by both the Ontario and Burlington Chambers of Commerce, and it's comprised of 3 pillars: finishing the fight against COVID, getting the fundamentals right, and creating 21st century opportunities. As mentioned earlier, our first 3 questions come from our Political Action Committee, and we're going to be starting with Nick Page, Burlington's NDP candidate on this. So the first question is, if elected, what are the top 3 priorities for the Burlington? What are your top 3 priorities for the Burlington riding over the next 4 years, and how do you plan to address them?
Thank you. My top 3 priorities for this coming election, should I be elected, are: number 1, we need to put into place an actual plan for helping the environment. We need to stop subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. We need to make sure that Burlington can transition properly into a greener economy. We need to upgrade transit to make sure it is fully green. We need to make sure that electric vehicle charging stations are available. We need to make sure that everything is done that is possible to make sure we are green. The second thing we need to work on is electoral reform to make sure we can keep any changes that we make going forward. the last thing is to bring in a universal basic income to make sure that small businesses and individuals in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. And now over to the Honorable Karina Gould, the Liberal candidate for Burlington.
Excellent, thank you. So my top 3 priorities for our community and our country are: first, finishing the fight against COVID-19. If we want to get our economy back on track, we have to finish the fight on COVID-19. And that means making sure everyone who can get vaccinated does get vaccinated. Because if small businesses and normal and bigger sized businesses want to get back to normal, we know that this is the most effective way to finish the fight against COVID-19. The second one is fighting climate change and taking bold climate action. If we are going to be a jurisdiction of choice for investment, we need to take that bold climate action, because investors know that the environment and the economy go together. And so we need to keep taking this bold climate action and not allow the Conservatives to make Canada the first country that would roll back our climate action, making us a place where investors don't want to invest. And the third is affordable universal daycare. We saw throughout the pandemic that this impacted our economy.
Thank you so much, Minister.
Canadian families.
Thank you. Now over to Christian Cullis, the Green Party candidate.
Thank you. My first priority is trying to heal the increasing divides between us as Canadians. We do not have with us the PPC candidate, Michael Bader, who, while I have not had the pleasure to meet, I did meet his Oakville counterpart at an anti-mask demonstration outside of City Hall. We don't live in the same reality as our neighbors anymore, and that's a problem. We need to be able to return to a place before January 6th, when the US Capitol was stormed by protesters who were determined to save their country and defended by guards who were determined to save their country. We need to look at the environment and get a cohesive strategy on what actually needs to be done, because business as usual is not a solution. We need to also invest in transit, because Canada is the second largest country in the world, and it is a unique difficulty that we face.
Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you. It's tricky with the 60 seconds. Now over to Emily Brown, the Conservative candidate for Burlington.
Thank you. So my top 3 priorities are: 1, firing up the economy, getting people back to work. That means incentivizing hiring and incentivizing people to want to return to work. I've heard from many business owners here that they're having trouble filling positions and actually having to limit opening their businesses because of that. The second is affordable housing. My kids can probably never afford a home here in Burlington, so we need to increase supply and look at ways to make house ownership more affordable. The third thing is public safety. We have gangs, we have drug smuggling, and we have human trafficking that sits right here in Burlington. It's not being addressed by the current government, and that is a huge impact on how citizens of Burlington feel safe, and that is my third and actually a very large priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Now on to the next question. The COVID-19 pandemic has created labor shortages in many sectors such as hospitals and others. How will you and your party address these shortages and help businesses recover from the pandemic? Christian, I'm starting with you.
Thank you. This is a problem that no party is going to have a solution to, because the world is changing faster and faster every day. We have automated checkout. We're looking at the future of self-driving cars. The labor market is changing because the technology on what labor even is these days is changing. Oh, I see as part of this solution being guaranteed livable income to ensure that all citizens are able to maintain a decent standard of living as we transition away from the old styles of economies that started in the Industrial Revolution to whatever the economy of the 21st and 22nd century end up looking like. And we can't predict what that will be. We can only ensure that our citizens have a decent standard of living.
Thanks so much, Christian. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you. I agree very much with Christian here. We need to make sure that our citizens have the means necessary to survive regardless of what they are doing for work. That will put them in a position where they are able to go and work for businesses that share their values, that share their interests, that allow them to feel productive. It isn't enough to just have meaningless jobs that barely pay the rent. We need to make sure that people have their rent and their food needs met so they can go and work in our businesses regardless of how much they can pay and how many benefits they can provide. Those are things the government should be ensuring the citizens have, not things that are placed on the shoulders of our businesses. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you. So the question was, how are we going to address shortages in employees, especially in those high needs areas with healthcare and so on? So one of the things that I had experience with is educating international students and new Canadians, and they often come here with foreign credentials, and there isn't an easy supportive program in order to have those credentials recognized. So we have new Canadians who have healthcare background, engineering background, and so on. So I am really impressed that Erin O'Toole has put programs in place that will help recognize these foreign credentialed individuals, as well as grants and loans for longer living Canadians to go back to school in order to become PSWs and work in healthcare. I've spoken to nurses in long-term care in hospitals. One long-term care employee, she's a nurse. She called me almost in tears. They have 2 cleaners for 46 rooms and 1 PSW for 20 residents. We need to be able to bring those.
Thanks so much, Emily. We're at time. And over to you, Minister.
Great, thank you so much. So the first thing that I will say is that I stand with our healthcare workers who have been on the front lines and absolute heroes over the last 18 months, and who unfortunately are being targeted for saving people's lives. Our federal Liberal government would transfer to the provinces and territories money specifically to hire, recruit, and retain healthcare workers. We're seeing a significant shortage of nurses, doctors, PSWs, and other healthcare professionals. Unlike the Conservatives who would send money unattached with no strings to the provinces and territories, we know we need to deliver specifically for Canadians. We would also extend the Canada Recovery Hiring Benefit for small businesses and businesses until March of 2022. Throughout the pandemic, the Liberals have been there for small businesses. We have been with you every step of the way, and the Conservatives have voted against those supports every step of the way.
Thank you, Minister. And you're going to be next up for this, the upcoming question. So this is our last question from our Political Action Committee. There are many financial challenges facing our country, including dealing with all the costs of the COVID-19 pandemic, mitigating and adapting to climate change, and the ever-increasing cost of healthcare due to the rapid growth in the number of seniors who are living longer than ever before. With all these and other financial challenges, how does your party plan on balancing the budget and paying down Canada's debt in a timely fashion?
Well, thank you for the question. And I'd like to just ask a counterfactual. Imagine if we hadn't have supported your businesses. Imagine if we hadn't have supported your employees to get through the last 18 months. This was the biggest crisis our country has faced since the Second World War. We needed to do this, and Canada's economy has come out stronger than our peer countries. We've recovered 92% of our jobs, where in the US, they've only recovered 75%. But here's something else that's important. It's investing in you and your businesses. It's investing in people. Affordable daycare is one of the best ways we can get our economy back on track, to get women back into the workforce, and to increase our productivity. Families need this. In our community, people are paying $1,500 to $2,200 a month in daycare. We've signed 8 agreements with provinces and territories, and the Conservatives want to scrap the whole thing.
Thanks, Minister. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you so much. This unnecessary election is costing Canadian taxpayers $610 million. Our plan for the recovery is to get people back to work, to increase the tax base, to not overtax individuals, to encourage investment in Canadian companies with tax incentives to those who would invest $100,000. Also to help employees go back to work and employees cover the cost of new employees, those who may have been out of work for 6 months or longer because of this pandemic. We're going to be covering the cost of their first 6 months of employment for any new employee that has been out of work for 6 months or longer. We all know that new employees are less productive, need more support and training, and we feel that that will get people back to work and get this economic engine going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Nick, and then we'll hear from Christian.
Canada's government did help keep people afloat during the pandemic, but only because the NDP forced the Liberals to increase what they wanted to do. As far as the deficit goes, we need to not cut costs going forward, but to raise more revenue. We have large corporations in this country who have profited massively over the course of this pandemic, and they need to pay their fair share. The NDP will increase their tax rate to make sure we can continue to pay for the services that Canadians and small businesses need. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Christian?
Thank you. I find the question difficult to answer, and you can feel free to call this youthful optimism. I have heard talk about the economy and recovery all of my adult life. I was 15 during the 2008 financial crash when my teachers straight up told me, you will not have a job when you graduate, not high school, not university, not nothing. The system is stacked against you and broken. So the idea of fixing the thing that's broken kind of doesn't do much for me. Under Green Party leadership, we would keep the tax rate for small businesses at 9% and introduce a tax of 1% on family wealth over $20 million, which to me sounds like an all right place to start taxing people. Ensuring that Canadian families are living lives that are good for them, not lives that help them work more, but lives that let them live more, is what really matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. So the next series of questions comes from the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington. And we're going to be starting with you, Emily. Housing supply issues have a fairly significant impact on long-term housing affordability. What can the federal government do to help with housing supply issues across the country?
Again, with the increased costs of construction and the lack of supply, we're finding that many Canadians simply can't afford a home, and they are really concerned about their future. So the federal government, under Conservative leadership, will implement a plan to increase supply of 1 million homes over the next 3 years. Yes, that's ambitious, but we have partners in doing that. We're looking at releasing some unused federal land in order to provide space for new houses. We're going to be incentivizing those who will develop in Canadian houses, both for ownership and for rental. We'll raise the barriers for foreign ownership. In fact, if it needs to be temporarily, but at least to have homes that are available to Canadians, because currently we have many sitting vacant. We will also encourage Canadians to invest in rental properties by deferring capital gains on rental properties as long as they roll back into investing again in rental properties.
Thank you, Emily. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you. Real estate and housing is a problem because they stopped making land. So we do have a supply problem of more people wanting the same amount, but there's a Joni Mitchell song about paving paradise. And long-term, this can't be a solution to our housing crisis. Under a Green government, we would invest in the construction and operation of over 50,000 supportive housing units over 10 years and build and acquire at a minimum of 250,000 deeply affordable, non-market, co-op, nonprofit housing over a decade. That's keeping housing affordable, not simply because you're just building more endlessly, but because you are looking at the cost of housing and thinking, what value does this have to a citizen, and ensuring that that is the priority. We would create a Canadian co-op housing strategy, updating the mechanisms for financing co-op housing with many partners and many co-op societies.
Thank you, Christian. Over to you, Minister, and then Nick.
Thank you. And I'd like to begin by addressing an issue that has arisen in Burlington. I have heard from many voters that the Conservative candidate has brazenly lied to them about the Liberal housing plan. She has told them that we will be taxing capital gains on the sale of a primary residence. This is simply untrue. And it is the first time that I've had a Conservative candidate in this community in 3 elections outwardly and so brazenly mislead people in our community. Frankly, they deserve better than that. Our Liberal government, if re-elected, would build 1.4 million homes over the next years. We would create a tax-free savings account for first-time home buyers. We would also create a new rent-to-own program. We would also work, as we could have done already for the last 6 years, with developers to build more rental supply. In fact, just before the election, I was in Hamilton with the YWCA, where 50 affordable units are coming online in October. We've been there when it comes to housing, and we'll continue to do that important work.
Thanks, Minister. Nick, over to you.
Thank you. The NDP has plans for building 500,000 sustainable, affordable housing under an NDP government. It is important that we think about the incentives that we're putting in when we build these houses also. We need to make sure that they are used for people to be able to live in, and not just for foreign investors to buy up and leave empty. They do this because they know they will make money when they do so, as our supply is so restricted. So we need to take efforts both to increase supply by building more houses, but also to prevent the foreign investors from squatting on our properties by reducing the profit incentives for doing so. We can do this by raising the taxes that they have to pay when they buy and sell to flip these properties. We need to get people living in our houses, not just having them sit empty. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. And I'm going to stay with you for the next question. How does your party intend to support first-time home buyers and new Canadians across this country that are struggling to find housing that meets their needs?
The NDP has a plan in place to provide a large $5,000 subsidy for renters who are paying more than 30% of their income in rent costs. This will allow these people a better chance to save up the down payment nest egg that you need in order to buy a home of your own. This will go coupled with the affordable housing that we build, and hopefully the supply increase by eliminating the foreign investor or restricting the foreign investors to allow people a better chance to get into these homes for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Over to you, Minister.
Great, thank you. And I would like Ms. Brown perhaps to address the fact that she's been deliberately misleading voters. I think Canadians and people in Burlington deserve better than that at their doors. As I mentioned, we would create a first-time tax-free savings account for first-time home owners. We would create a more flexible first-time home buyer incentive to ensure that people can get into the market. I've heard from so many people, my friends in this community that I grew up in, who are unable to purchase a home. And we recognize that we need to do better when it comes to enabling first-time home buyers to get into markets such as Burlington. But we will also do our part to cool down the market, cracking down on foreign ownership, stopping excessive profits from REITs, and curbing speculation and house flipping, because we know that this is increasing the heat in our market and we need to do our part to cool it down.
Thanks, Minister. Christian, and then over to you, Emily.
Thank you. As someone who cannot afford a home in Burlington, this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. And I'd like to share with you, this is the Burlington Report on Housing, proudly boasting that the average resale price of a home in Burlington is over $1 million. And this isn't a problem that any one government can solve just on its own, because again, it is getting to the fundamentals of our economy. You want to make money when you resell your home. You always want to have that net profit. The idea of not getting something, the idea of a mutualistic exchange where both parties can be relatively happy without a dollar sign being attached to it does not work in our current economic model. A green government will declare housing affordability and homelessness a national emergency and redefine affordable housing using a better formula that actually accounts for regional variations across the country. This way people get homes where they live, not get homes where they're built.
Thanks, Christian. And Emily, to wrap us up on this question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. So new home ownership is obviously a great challenge. The home I live in here in Burlington has doubled in price in 8 years. My own children, adults, cannot afford to live here where they would like to. A conservative government will not tax the equity in your principal residence. We have not been studying it as a government, and we do not have it in our platform. That is a firm commitment from Canada's Conservatives. We're hoping to ease up on the stress test for mortgages so that people can actually get a mortgage more easily. We're also going to be looking at removing the requirement for homeowners who want to search for more competitive rates to not undergo a stress test again, and they're just seeking new lenders. We're also going to be re-examining the down payment requirement so that people can actually get into a home more easily, but also looking at encouraging 7 to 10 year mortgage terms so that Canadians can budget more fully and for a longer period of time so that they can actually know what house they can afford.
Thanks, Emily. Certainly housing is definitely a topic we've been hearing about a lot at the Ontario Chamber. Christian, I'm going to start with you for the next question. How would your government ensure we build that healthy mix that encompasses the entire spectrum, including home ownership, rentals, and community housing?
Thank you. So I did address this a little bit in my previous answer. The idea of restructuring the definition of what affordable housing is so that it more accurately reflects reality. There's no good in having a system that determines what is affordable housing if it's completely disjointed from the actual way that people live. So by doing this just in itself, it means that we're getting a more accurate read on what the housing market is and who needs what houses. There's also an effort to make sure that in each new housing development that comes up, at least 30% of those houses are deeply affordable. That is to say that they are not priced in the millions of dollars outside the reaches of first-time home buyers. They are deeply affordable. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Nick, over to you, then Emily, then Minister.
Thank you. So currently, the incentive structures that we have in place for people who are building homes is to build homes and condos and apartments that will sell for the most. This is a problem because it continues to perpetuate the idea that people can't afford to buy their houses for the first time. We need to make sure that we are building all kinds of homes. Luxury homes are great for the people who can afford them, but we can't all afford them. We need to not have everything be a luxury home. We need the social housing. We need cheaper starter homes. We need cheap rental units so that people who are barely scraping by have a good place to live so that they aren't paying all of their money into their rent. They need to have a way to save up to get a down payment so they can get into the housing market. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Over to Emily.
Hi. So one of the things that the federal government under Conservative leadership is looking at is, of course, converting unused office space to affordable housing. There's a plethora of office space right now in places where people work, and that would be a great way to address that. We're going to incentivize investors to build housing across the entire market need, not just high-end housing, which we see going up across Toronto and Burlington and so on, with condos and so on costing $1 million. So we're going to incentivize investors to really put their money in all market needs. And for those who renovate or build rental housing as their investment, then we're going to allow them to defer their capital gains tax if they immediately go and invest in new rental properties for the housing market.
Thanks, Emily. Minister?
Great, thank you. So our government has already invested $73 billion in affordable housing over the last 5 years. We were the first federal government to introduce a national housing strategy. And in fact, when the Conservatives were in power, they actually took the federal government out of housing, which is what kind of enabled that boom and that explosion in the first place. So it's a little hard to trust the Conservatives when their record is the exact opposite. But we will continue to work on more affordable housing. We have the co-investment fund, which works with developers and not-for-profit organizations. We have the Rapid Housing Initiative, which turned into affordable housing very quickly over the past year. But we're also working with the private sector as well, and have also a plan to convert unused office space into housing, as well as to continue to incentivize developers to build more affordable housing, to make sure that in those condo developments, 20 to 30% is there for affordable units in perpetuity. We have been there on housing, and we will continue to be there on housing, working with the diversity of partners that we have in this community and across.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And Minister, I'm staying with you for the next question. The next series of questions are from our audience. I want to thank everyone that sent questions in. There was a number of them. We've picked certain ones. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we have finite time today. So Minister, what is your and your party's perspective on those people who do not wish to be vaccinated against COVID-19? What strategies will you deploy to encourage vaccine uptake?
Well, thank you for the question. And let me just start by asking anyone who's watching, do you have a child or a grandchild under the age of 12? Because if you do, like me, I have a 3-year-old, I've done everything I can to protect them. But unfortunately, the Conservatives aren't willing to take the necessary step to protect their health and their safety. We would require mandatory vaccines for all federal workers, for anyone who's taking a plane or a train, because it's our duty as adults to protect our children. We're seeing across the southern United States increasing rates of pediatric cases of COVID-19, and our job as leaders, as parents, as grandparents, is to protect our children. They're not eligible to get vaccinated yet, so we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to get those who can vaccinated. We will support provinces and territories who bring forward vaccine certificates, and we will continue to encourage and support Canadians to do the right thing to end the fight against COVID-19.
Appreciate that. Emily, over to you.
Hi, thank you. When Canadians were finally given the supply of vaccines, we did see a vaccine rate that saw a decline in the transmission and infection rate. Vaccines have been the way out of this pandemic. We've seen an imbalance and impact of the pandemic within our long-term care facilities. So Conservatives are encouraging all Canadians to be vaccinated. We see the benefits. However, we also stand behind our Charter of Rights and Freedoms for people to choose their own medical future. And so mandatory vaccinations and mandatory vaccination passports are not something that Canada's Conservatives support. We would rather support our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Erin O'Toole has suggested a vaccine passport to make it easy for Canadians to travel abroad to countries which require a passport there.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks.
Nick, and then to Christian.
Thank you. So the vaccinations are very safe, and they are part of the social contract we all agree to by living in a civilized society. We need everyone who can be vaccinated to get vaccinated, and we need to make sure the incentive structures are in place to encourage these people to get vaccinated. If that means rewarding them for doing so, so be it, but we've seen in Alberta that that doesn't really work. What is working is having vaccine passports. If you don't want to get vaccinated, fine, but you shouldn't be able to then go out into our communities and spread disease. We need the vaccine passports to stop people from going to concerts and from going on planes, because that is going to make our society sicker. And we have the obligation to do what we can to keep our people safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Christian, wrap us up.
Oh man, I wish I had more than a minute. This is a complex issue. I agree with Ms. Brown that there is a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and to mandate vaccines, well, I suppose you can quit your job so you're not forced to do it, but I support a woman's rights to choose in the case of abortion. I support a person's rights to choose over what happens to their own body. At the same, you can't answer this in a minute, but I think the debate that is happening unintentionally right now is what is real. There are Canadian citizens who believe that vaccines are a money laundering scheme by pharma companies. And to simply say, well, you are ignorant, you are uninformed, you are harmful, you don't care about your children, it's not healing the divide. It's not getting us living in the same reality where we can look at each other and say, I respect that you have a different opinion. We live in a society. We'll have to agree to disagree on this. And we have to get back to that place.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Christian. And I know, I'm speaking for 1 minute is almost impossible for me. So, and my mother taught me not to interrupt people. So this is, we all have our challenges. I'm going to kick off the next question with Emily. What, if elected, will your government do to develop a comprehensive strategy for seniors in community and long-term care?
Thank you. Well, there are a couple of things. Seniors don't always want to be in long-term care. So one of the things that the Conservative government is looking at is allowing seniors to age in place, meaning supports for caregivers so that they're able to afford the time and the extra cost of keeping a senior in their home as long as possible. One of the other things that came up with the Sears closing was the concern about pensions when companies restructure or when they fail. How are company pensions protected? Many Sears employees were left empty-handed even after decades of working. So the Conservative government will ensure that pensions are protected first and foremost when restructuring a company, so that those are the first debtors paid, and that executives aren't receiving money on top of on the backs of pensioners. We'll also be protecting seniors in their residence by ensuring that.
Thank you, Emily. Now we'll go over to Christian, then we'll go to you, Minister, and then Nick.
Thank you. Canada has the worst record for COVID-19 deaths in long-term care homes. There's over 15,000 long-term care residents that have died from COVID, and many more from a lack of care that happened during the pandemic. 69% of our known COVID deaths happened in long-term care residents, and this is an area where we can improve, to put it lightly. This was preventable, and a Green government will bring in long-term care under the Canada Health Act, improve the quality of care in these long-term care facilities, provide transformative investment for seniors' care, including infrastructure and staff funding. And again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but what are the underpinnings of our society where we have these care homes where sometimes people are simply put away to pasture? And these are human beings. These are the lives of our parents and grandparents. And we need to build a society where people don't need to make decisions on the care of their family members for affordability reasons.
Thank you, Christian. Over to you, Minister.
What happened in long-term care in this country was a national tragedy. It has always been an area of provincial jurisdiction, but during the pandemic, our Liberal government stepped up and stepped in. We sent in the Canadian Armed Forces, we sent in the Canadian Red Cross, and we saw firsthand the terrible conditions in which too many of our seniors were living. We have developed and are developing national standards for long-term care. We are sending money to the provinces and territories for enforcement of those standards. We will send money to increase the pay for our personal support workers. Our PSWs take care of the most vulnerable people in our community. They deserve to be paid a living wage. We have also, if we're elected, will send money to the provinces and territories to improve the infrastructure, the ventilation, the quality of care that our seniors receive. We cannot afford to have a Conservative government that will not step in when it comes to long-term care. Our seniors are too valuable, and this is too important of an issue to let go.
Thank you so much. And Nick?
So we need to consider what the incentive structure is in long-term care when it's for profit. if long-term care centers are run for profit, they are incentivized to cut corners wherever they can. If they can reduce the quality of food and save some money, that's good for the profiters. It's bad for the people in long-term care. Therefore, we need to remove profit entirely from long-term care. We can expand long-term care, and this is a place for job growth now and in the future. Automation isn't going to hit this area. This is a place where we can be training people to work in. And finally, long-term care is not just a senior issue. It is a disabled person issue as well. We need to keep that in mind when we're discussing this topic. If we bring in a universal basic income, we will provide people with the means to be able to get the care they need, long-term or otherwise.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. The next question is about what types of policies you and your party will implement to improve diversity and inclusion in our business community. Nick, we'll kick this off with you.
Thank you. So this, again, it all comes back to incentive structures. What can we do to incentivize our small business owners, our entrepreneurs to be more diverse? We can try to make this happen by bringing in more subsidies for people who are currently marginalized. We can bring in better loans, like easier to access loans so people can get started easier. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick. Minister, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you for what is a really important question, and one in which I know the Burlington Chamber and the Chamber Network has been very engaged, and I'm very proud to have been working with you on this, particularly on your women entrepreneurship strategy, but also with regards to visible minorities. Our government has already been doing this. We have been working with the business community on the 50 by 30 challenge, which looks to have 50% of representation on boards be gender equal, 30% being visible minorities. We launched the Black Entrepreneurship Strategy, which has been guided by the Black entrepreneur community. We've also launched the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, which I think a number of people on this call have directly benefited from. And I have been very pleased to work with the Chamber, with Hall Tech, with the Burlington Economic Development Corporation to continue to advance diversity and inclusion. You know, our Prime Minister often says, diversity is our greatest strength in Canada, but I like to add that inclusion and belonging must become our identity. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Christian, over to you.
Thank you. As part of building a transition to a just society and a green transition, we need to be building diversity in these areas because there is no solution to the climate crisis without also addressing the inequalities that have allowed it to progress. We're Canadians, and I am proud to be a Canadian, but that our clothing are made in sweatshops in Indonesia, and suddenly we don't care about workers' wages or rights or housing in that country because they're not Canadian citizens is it's immoral. We are Canadian citizens, but we are also citizens of the world. And so in order to create opportunities for marginalized groups in business, let's invest and encourage incentive structures that at the same time address the climate crisis by acknowledging that when everyone is equal, we will all treat each other equally. When everyone is treated unequally, we end up with unequal power structures.
Thanks, Christian. Next question is, what do you believe to be the greatest opportunity in Burlington to mitigate climate change locally to support Burlington's climate action plan? And if elected, sorry?
I wasn't able to answer the inclusion and diversity question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My
Okay.
apologies.
It's hard to
Over
keep
Emily.
track of who's going when and everyone.
I went ahead in my notes. Thank you.
And thanks, Nick, for waving your hand as well. So thank you so much. As a professor at Sheridan College in the business faculty, I have taught now hundreds of international students and new Canadians, and their contribution to Canada cannot be underestimated. And I'm very proud to launch them in their personal and professional goals. Aaron O'Toole himself has said that multiculturalism and inclusion are pillars of Canada, and Canada's Conservatives will always fight to protect our diversity and ensure equal treatment for all. So many new Canadians, as I stated earlier, they come to Canada with foreign credentials, and they're often forced into part-time or piecemeal work because their credentials cannot be recognized. So Conservative Party has a plan to recognize and mentor those new Canadians so that they can start contributing in fields that we need them in, and so that they start to value their contribution in the places that they're most passionate about. So I'm very proud of that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Going back to my, I'll repeat the question and apologies again for the miss there. What do you believe to be the greatest opportunity in Burlington to mitigate climate change locally to support Burlington's climate action plan? And if elected, what specific actions will you take to support residents and the municipality in advancing this opportunity? So we'll start with the Green Party candidate.
Thank you. This is again, more than a minute would be nice, because while the contributions within Burlington are important, climate change is a global issue. Locally, I'm very concerned with Rainbow Creek, a underground river that is part of it's a huge contributor to the diversity and wildlife in Burlington. And as someone who has lived abroad, we really are blessed with a wonderful place in the world to live. We're on the Canadian, we're on the Niagara Escarpment. We are a center of wildlife, biodiversity, and it is so lovely. So within Burlington, the best thing that we can do is preserve this and make sure that our wildlife stays as vibrant as it can by making sure that development projects that would threaten the Rainbow Creek, the RBG, the Greenbelt are halted as much as possible, because you can't get it back. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Over to the NDP candidate, Nick Page.
Thank you. So I see two big ways that we can get Burlington involved in fighting the climate crisis. The first is we need to electrify our mass transit fleet, and we need to encourage our citizens to electrify their own personal use cars. We can do this with subsidies towards buying electric vehicles, and by making sure that we get more electric vehicle charging stations installed in all areas of the city. The other aspect we can do is the NDP is committed to retrofitting all of our buildings to be more energy efficient going forward. This is important because we do use a lot of energy on air conditioning in the summer and on heating in the winter, and making that energy use as efficient as we can is something that all Burlingtonians can do, and it will help lower greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Thanks. Over to the Conservative Party of Canada candidate.
So despite our carbon tax by the current government, greenhouse gas emissions have risen over the last 6 years. So evidence is clear that we cannot tax our way out of a climate crisis. So what we're going to be doing as Conservatives is creating a personal account that they can pay into when they buy hydrocarbon fuels. And those initiatives then will be able to pay for greener choices for Conservatives and for Canadians. They can choose to invest in a transit pass, bicycles, better insulation for their homes, replacing windows, or more energy efficient appliances. We are looking at better infrastructure in Burlington specifically. Anyone who travels the QEW or any of the main roads knows that our infrastructure is in trouble as more residents move into Burlington. We're going to encourage people to move through public transit, and also to live closer to work if that's possible. And
thanks, Emily. Over to the Liberal Party of Canada candidate, Karina Gold.
Thank you. So the Globe and Mail said the Conservatives' new carbon plan would provide incentives to burn more fuel. It's been dubbed the burn to earn plan. It will actually be the only carbon pricing system that would increase and incentivize the increase of emissions. So it's a little hard to put the Conservatives at face value when they say they care about the environment. The Conservative candidate didn't even show up to the debate on the environment and climate change. Our government has the best plan for Canada. Environmental economists and activists agree it will not only reach but exceed our Paris climate targets. We have already been investing in supporting the City of Burlington's climate action plan. I announced $600,000 just before the election to revitalize and restore our wetlands here in our community, which will help with flood mitigation. We are investing in DeFasco to get rid of the smokestacks. It'll be the equivalent of taking 1.8 million cars off the road in our community every year, while at the same time protecting thousands of good middle-paying jobs. We've got the plan to fight climate change, protect our planet, and help build this economy.
Thank you. Next question, what tax incentives will you put in place for both small and large businesses to help them recover from the pandemic? I'm going to kick this off with the Liberal Party of Canada candidate.
So I think this is a really good question because we've been there the entire time for small businesses. I've had the pleasure to work with many of you throughout the pandemic and will continue to support you through the recovery. You know, I saw someone describe the Liberal versus the Conservative plan, and basically the Liberal plan is $10 a day daycare supporting businesses, and the Conservatives plan is 50% off at Swiss Chalet a few Mondays this year. So you can either have a real plan that's going to revitalize the economy, or you can have a plan that the CFIB has described as gimmicky, that will create more red tape, more paperwork for small businesses. You've been through a lot over the last 18 months. You need our support. You don't need mountains of paperwork that are going to disincentivize people to come shop and spend at your locations. You need a government that's going to be there for you, support you, and get you into a place where you're going to thrive once again.
Thank you. Over to Nick Page, the NDP candidate.
So it's not specifically about a tax break, but I think one of the huge things that we can do to help small businesses is by implementing a universal pharmacare and dental system. Right now, our workers are relying on our small business owners to provide them with these insurance policies that the country, the government should be providing for them. This is a cost we are shoving onto businesses instead of government, and it's a cost they shouldn't need to hold. In addition, the government will be in a better position to negotiate better rates because they're dealing with more people. A small business might be getting 4 or 5 policies. That's going to cost them more than the government doing it themselves. So by bringing in a universal pharmacare, a universal dental care plan, we will be helping small businesses moving forward by reducing one of their costs. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick. Over to the Green Party of Canada candidate, Christian.
Thank you. I like to think of business as an ecosystem, and one way to get a good ecosystem is to make sure that things are fair. Natural ecosystems work like that. With human-made ecosystems, over time, everything great about capitalism is susceptible to regulatory capture, to crony capitalism, to incentivizing systems that just reward those who are already on top. And as part of the global economy, helping small businesses needs to happen at a global level. Canada needs to work with our international partners to implement a global minimum for the tax rate so the biggest companies cannot continue to grow larger and larger in a manner that is honestly cancerous. I can tell you as someone from the youngest generation who has inherited an economy that is broken and stacked against us, we cannot continue on with these systems of buy, spend, tax, money, spend, spend, spend. We need to build a new system for everyone.
Thank you, Christian. And now over to the Conservative Party of Canada candidate, Emily Brown.
Thanks. So we have the highest unemployment rate right now at 7.8% of G7 countries. We have a weird imbalance between job seekers and employers because of how the pandemic has disproportionately affected sectors. We also have had the highest inflation rate in July at 3.6%, the highest since 2014. Canada's Conservatives will partially forgive loans for businesses who invest back into Canadian and Burlington companies. We need to take it out of government control and help Canadians invest in their own businesses. We need to stop the bleed of businesses that are fleeing the country because of poor policies. I'm hearing that everywhere at the door. We will also incentivize the hiring of employees who have been out of work, knowing that the longer you're out of work, the harder it is to get back into the employment field. So we're going to be offsetting the salaries for up to 6 months for companies who hire individuals.
Thanks so much, Emily. Kicking off with Christian for the next question. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. How will you and your government, if elected, work with other parties to protect Canadians?
Thank you for the question. The most important thing in this pandemic is trying to round the corner as best we can. And that's not going to happen for a while. The difficulty with containing the pandemic is it is a living thing. The Delta variant is spreading and we are looking at an upcoming fourth wave. This is complicated by the fact that not everyone agrees on the best plan to address the pandemic. And again, I step away from politics here in saying that the issue is not one of policy, it's an issue of humanity. Who are our neighbors? Who do we care about? Why are they worth caring about? We need to look at each other as human beings, not just Green Party, NDP, Conservative, Liberal. We need to say we are Canadians. Not even we're Canadians. We are humans. We care about each other and we need to work together, whatever the cost, to make sure that we all get through this in one piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to the Conservative Party of Canada candidate.
Hi, thank you very much. We know that provinces were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. One of the things that a Liberal voting friend of mine said to me was, I would vote for you because you're in favor of good ideas no matter where they come from. I met Christian at the door a few weeks ago and we have committed to having a coffee because he said rightly that we have more in common than we have different, and I certainly believe that. So the first thing an elected Conservative government will do will be working with the premiers to find out how best we can support them, because they've been had to handle the pandemic mismanagement with fewer vaccines than needed, later than they were needed. And so now what's happening with the provinces is this recovery may be taking longer than was necessary. So that's the first thing that we would do. And of course, listening to other parties across in the House of Commons to find out what their good ideas are, because they've been listening to their voters, and that's where we need to go.
Thank you so much. Over to the Liberal Party of Canada candidate.
Great, thank you. Well, so first of all, I have to say, we have been working with parties across the political spectrum and across the country. The Prime Minister has had more FPT meetings than any Prime Minister in Canadian history. But I have to push back on my Conservative colleague here, because Aaron O'Toole, the only pandemic response that he has praised in this country is Alberta's. And Alberta has the lowest vaccination rate. They have the highest increase in daily cases. They are experiencing a severe fourth wave. So if you want to have a Conservative Prime Minister that is going to side with the people who are not willing to take the steps to protect you and your family, by all means, vote Conservative. But if you want strong leadership that's going to protect your family, protect your community, protect the health of the people that you love, then you need to vote Liberal, because we're the only ones that are going to take those steps necessary to make sure that we end and get through this pandemic.
Thank you so much. And Nick, over to you.
The Liberal government may have been working with other parties a lot on this issue, but that's because they were in a minority government and we're in an election right now, so that they don't have to do that. They believe they can get a majority so they can stop listening to other parties. We need to bring in a system that encourages all parties to work with each other at all times, and that will require electoral reform. This will, moving away from first past the post, will give a voice to all Canadians, and will make sure that all Canadians are required to be heard in order to get things done. I do agree also that we need to work more closely with the provinces because we need a Canada-wide strategy for a vaccination passport type system. This will work better when we have one system and not 12, 13, however many we end up getting. It's better if they're all integrated because it is very important that we have it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. There's been a lot of discussion about how our nation is having an echo pandemic, the mental health crisis. If elected, how will your government address the mental health crisis that's resulting from the pandemic and frankly was already quite difficult pre-pandemic? Over to the Conservative Party of Canada candidate, Emily Brown.
Hi, thank you. We have had the highest opioid death rate in Canada because of high addictions and mental health concerns. As an instructor at Sheridan College, my students don't say she's a great instructor because she teaches math. I'm a great instructor because I care about their well-being, the whole student. So the Conservative Party platform is the only one that has a Secure the Mental Health platform. We're going to be increasing health transfers so that we can have more addiction beds available. That has been a huge shortage during the pandemic. People are desperate to get themselves and their children help. We're going to make sure that we address the opioid crisis with root causes, what's happening, why are young people losing hope in their futures. And we've discussed many of those things with respect to housing affordability, jobs, and so on. And so we have a Secure the Mental Health plan that I'm very proud of.
Thank you. Over to the NDP candidate.
So when we talk about addiction, we need to talk about why people get addicted to these sorts of drugs. And it comes from not having your needs met. And this is a problem that can only be solved by making sure that every Canadian has their basic needs met. Every Canadian needs to know that they have a source of food and that they have shelter coming in. This will prevent them from getting into these downward spirals where they feel like they can only turn to mind-altering drugs. The key to making this happen is a universal basic income. If we provide the social structures to keep everyone's needs met, we will reduce these problems that are created solely from people not having their needs met. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Over to the Liberal Party of Canada candidate.
Thank you, Michelle. And this is a really important issue. I mean, mental health was a severe issue in our country before the COVID-19 pandemic, but the pandemic has only exacerbated it. In 2015, when we were elected, we already transferred an additional $5 billion to the provinces and territories specifically to address youth mental health issues. The Reach Out Centre for Kids right here in our own community has been overwhelmed by the number of children seeking supports, and a re-elected Liberal government would provide even more supports for mental health. We would also bring mental health under the Canada Health Act so that we can continue to provide that support and make sure that it's done in a way that's universally accessible. The other thing that I would note is at the beginning of the pandemic, we also launched the wellnesstogether.ca portal, which is a free 24-hour access to counseling available to all Canadians, and over 1.2 million Canadians have accessed it. If you're experiencing a mental health crisis, please reach out. I will be happy to refer you to wellnesstogether.ca and other resources in our community.
Thank you so much. And Christian?
COVID winter was rough for everyone. And it was, I believe, 5 years anniversary of Robin Williams' suicide, after which Bell and a bunch of companies all said, let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about this thing that is, by definition, hidden from each other. And the sad answer is I don't think that any one government can really propose an answer to mental health. There are too many complex factors involved. We have social media bombarding us with messages that promote a fear of missing out. We have companies trying to sell cell phones to 5-year-olds. We have a society that is not based on being healthy. It is based on having money. It is based on being a productive citizen, no matter the personal cost. And this is why we need to reevaluate what mental health is for all of us, starting from within. think for ourselves what is healthy. What a government can do to help, and the Green Party will, is establish a national health strategy and a suicide prevention strategy.
Thanks so
Make
much,
sure we're
Christian.
all right.
This will be the last question before we give the candidates a chance to provide closing comments. A question near and dear to my heart. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women, with some economists referring it to a C-session. It's not just a women's issue, it's an economic issue. How would your party support women in their economic recovery and address some of these issues that women experienced throughout the pandemic? I'm going to start with you, Nick.
Thank you. So the big problem here is that there just isn't the support in place for everyone. The CERB did a great job of helping people who were previously employed and then became less employed due to COVID-19. It didn't help people who weren't employed before. It didn't help people who were out raising a family and wanted to get back into the job market when the pandemic hit. Those people were left out. We need to make sure that we are helping everyone move forward. This will involve bringing in a national childcare strategy, for sure. But it also involves bringing in a universal income so that everyone is able to properly raise a family and then get back into the job market.
Thanks so much, Nick. I appreciate your comments. Over to the Liberal Party of Canada candidate, Karina Gould.
Thank you, Michelle. This is a hugely important question. As a working mom who didn't have daycare during the first wave, it was a huge struggle, like so many families, and families without daycare, without kids in school, suffered, and the economy suffered. As you said, economists have described this as a she-cession, and now we need a she-covery. We've invested in the women entrepreneurship strategy, but the most important thing is childcare, childcare, childcare. We have signed agreements with 8 provinces and territories for $10 a day childcare. This is good for kids, it's good for families, and it's really good for the economy. Economists agree affordable universal childcare is the way to kickstart our economy and make sure we have greater equality in our society. Unfortunately, the Conservatives want to recover on the backs of women and children. They are planning to cut our childcare program. They would only save wealthy families maybe $1,000 a year. Our plan will save families in our community $20,000 a year. That's an economic plan for women and for our country.
Thank you. Over to the Green Party of Canada candidate.
Thank you. I was raised by a single mom, and I know single mothers in this pandemic. I do not understand their strength. I can see it and I can admire it, but it is a real inspiration just to be able to watch. As part of helping with and it is a very catchy turn of phrase, a she-covery, Green Party would collaborate with women's and Indigenous organizations, developing a Canada-wide plan with a timetable and dedicated funding to address the 4 largest adverse effects that the pandemic has had on women, which is increased rates of gender-based violence, economic stress, an increased burden of caregiving and housework, and reduced access to support services. If you are the only person who is taking care of a child who needs constant support, you don't have the ability to go out and seek more support, which is why the support needs to be able to come to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. And over to the CPC candidate.
Thank you. So many found as a result of the pandemic that their priorities shifted, and we found that our personal and professional goals may have changed. So one of the things that we're providing is an ability to upskill or reskill in order to meet your professional goals, to change your strategy for going forward, and especially for women who have found themselves at home during the pandemic. I was a stay-at-home mother with my sons, and it was a choice I was able to make. We gave up a lot to do that. I did not benefit from any childcare program, although I feel that it is really a choice that needs to be made as a family, and it's not a government institution. There are childcare programs provincially, which the government needs to dovetail with, and simply institutionalizing childcare doesn't make sense. Government control is should be the second thing. Bill C-208 is a bill that allowed for the transfer of businesses, and many would be transferred.
We're
to
at
women.
time, Emily. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Listen, time is almost up, and I really enjoyed speaking with all of you. And I'm sure the audience that's tuned in has really appreciated your comments. So we're going to move to closing remarks. Candidates, you will now have 90 seconds, so it's going to feel like you have lots of time. We're going to go in reverse order from opening remarks. So we're going to kick off with Nick.
Thank you. Karina is going to make the case that you only have two options this election, and a vote for Christian or myself is just splitting the progressive vote. This carries with it some implicit assumptions that simply aren't true. The NDP came second in the 2018 provincial election here in Burlington, so there is clearly NDP support in our community. The pandemic has shown progressive Canadians that they only get progress when the NDP works with the Liberals. Too often, though, the Liberals voted with the Conservatives to shut down progressive legislation. Emily Brown may well win if the vote gets split, and good for her if she does. But you need to know that the only way the Conservatives win Burlington this year is because we're voting in an unnecessary election under first past the post. It won't be my fault for running a good campaign. It won't be the NDP's fault for offering progressives a chance at real progress. It will be on Justin Trudeau, his 2017 Minister of Democratic Institutions, Karina Gould, and the Liberal Party for reneging on their promise of electoral reform. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Now over to the Liberal Party of Canada candidate, the Honourable Karina Gould.
Great. Well, thank you very much for today's debate. Look, there are only two things that I know about the Conservative candidate in Burlington. The first is that she wants to weaken our gun laws, specifically repealing the assault-style weapon ban, saying, and I quote, "I want this rolled back further than it's been in the last round of elections." And two, she is deliberately lying to voters at the door about our Liberal housing plan. Burlington deserves better than this. I know this is a kind and progressive community. There are more people who want to keep moving forward by taking bold climate action, supporting businesses weather the pandemic, and building an economy that will thrive in the 21st century. People in Burlington believe in strict gun laws, in women's rights, LGBTQ rights, reconciliation with Indigenous people, and fighting systemic racism. Our community wants us to push forward with our national early learning and childcare system and affordable housing. My friends, we cannot afford for the Conservatives to take us backwards in Burlington. This election, if you care about these issues, I need your vote. The community deserves a strong, progressive member of parliament who will work hard and stand up for you, your family, and our community every time. Vote for me, Karina Gould, so we can keep moving forward together for everyone.
Thanks so much. Over to the Green Party of Canada candidate, Christian Cullis.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm at a loss for words. This is closing debates. I think supposedly I'm supposed to ask you for your vote, but this is democracy, and I'd rather ask simply that you think about who you are voting for. I believe in the fundamental goodness of human beings, and I believe that everyone here does want what's best for Canada. What we disagree with the wonderful thing of democracy is that we get to choose who leads us. And I hesitate to say anything negative. I'll see if I can't dance around the issue. But in the words of Roger Stone, one of Trump's chief lawyers who helped him evade countless legal problems, attack, 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 counterattack, never apologize, never back down. And I'll ask you just to think about what we've all said during this debate, whether we've spoken about the strength of our own platform, or if we've looked at our other neighbors, at our fellow citizens and colleagues and said, good Lord, aren't you afraid of what happens if they win? You know, in this election, like, oh God, what if, aren't you afraid? I don't ask that you vote for me. I ask that you think about who you vote for. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And over to the Conservative Party of Canada, candidate Emily Brown.
Thank you. First, thank you for this opportunity, the Chamber, for letting me meet Burlington residents and Burlington business owners. I pledge to work on behalf of Burlington residents to serve the needs and as we emerge from this pandemic specifically. With respect to my opening remarks, I am fully committed as one of my 3 top priorities in public safety in Burlington. We have tabled from the Liberal government 2 bills, C-22 and C-75, which literally move 118 indictable offenses to hybrid offenses without mandatory sentences. We have seen an increase in violent crime across the GTA in Vancouver, and it is emerging in Burlington as well. So we need to be looking at public safety. Law enforcement are dubbing C-22 as the catch and release bill. The Liberal government is making their jobs almost impossible. So as we emerge from this pandemic, Canada's Conservatives will secure jobs, secure accountability, so we have no more ethics violations within the government, secure mental health, secure the country so that we are not left without the supplies we need in Canada to address something like a pandemic again, and of course, secure our economy. I have to say, I do not need a job. I do not need a pension. I want to serve Burlington residents. That is my only goal. Thank you so much, all the candidates.
Thank you to all the candidates for taking the time to participate today. And thank you to our audience for all the wonderful questions. I'm sure everyone found this meeting useful, and we're looking forward to seeing the results on Monday, September 20th. So, you know, check out how you can vote locally. I'd like to turn things over to Jennifer Smith to wrap things up.
Thank you, Michelle, for moderating today. You did a great job, and thank you for the informative session with our candidates as well. I'd like to thank the candidates for taking part in our session. It's not easy to put your values and views on public display, so I always have the greatest respect for everyone who runs for public office. Thank you again to the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington for sponsoring today's meeting. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget, most importantly, to vote on September 20th.